You are Locked On Hawks POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks POSTCAST, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is longtime Hawks and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Locked On Hawks POSTCAST is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Hawks defense did it again. We'll talk about it. And it felt like there really were 6 men on the court tonight. We'll discuss. But first, let's talk takes on why the Hawks 134-132 overtime win over the Los Angeles Lakers just hits different. And for you, Tate, you said they're learning how to win.
They are. And listen, Tenitra, I think that that's been the biggest thing. Again, even if we don't necessarily have all the questions answered that we've been trying to figure out for the last year or two, maybe even more about not necessarily having an identity or not knowing exactly what that is. I think that it's just more so a matter of just growing and just knowing how to win. You can play a game and still not necessarily know how to win. You can win games and not know how. I think that they've learned what they'll need to do in order to win games. I always talk about hungry hippo, feeding the post. That's something they've been doing, pretty much outscoring teams just about every game, or at least it feels like it in the paint from a paints in the point standpoint. And I think that we're seeing that out of multiple guys. We talk about the growth of Trae. I think he's learning how to play. Everybody talks about him, in terms of his style of play and it, being empty calories and not equating into victories. But this kind of new way of him playing has kind of resulted in more W's. I think they know that in order for them to win, that is going to have to rely on the defensive end, which is the smartest thing first, and then let that convert into offense and translate. That they have done and been better defensively. So I think it's really all of these things. Know in order to win and knowing how to win, you're going to have to bring some of your most offensive production and fire some of your firepower off the bench to kind of provide a little bit of a spark, not necessarily starting your best players, that also being DeAndre Hunter. So I think that it's not necessarily just about what they're doing, it's about the way that they're doing it, and the way that they're doing it is equating into victories.
Indeed. And like you said, this is one of those things where we're not always accustomed. In fact, we're not accustomed to this type of game turning out this way. Literally, the thought was probably all around the arena. Once it went to overtime, that's it for the Hawks. They're done. But they weren't. They literally just continued to fight, continued to play through bad calls, times when they were down 4. It didn't matter. They kept moving. And that is something that we have not seen. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that maturity factor that we saw in so many instances tonight that we wouldn't have seen just a year ago. Now, my take was just they played another complete game. I think that you mentioned it in parts. Complete means a couple different things to me. So obviously a complete game means they won. So they played until the double zero. Then I know that might sound like, something to laugh about.
They don't always do that.
We know exactly. We know that we've had a lot of shows where they didn't play a complete game, meaning all the way to the end. Another thing that I want to say about the complete game definition, if you will, is if I'm able to look up and down the box score and see that everybody who touched the ball scored and or had a rebound and or had an assist in some way, shape, or form, that means everybody got after it. So, and to confirm, just to be clear and just to give the specifics of it, you look at the starters, 4 out of 5 are your starters, double digits. You look at your bench, 3 out of 4, because they did a 9-man rotation again tonight, 3 out of 4 double digits. So I do think it's one of those things where they played a complete game in that regard, having all 9 players making a difference. And I think, of course, we'll talk about this later. They played a complete game as well, because at the end of the day, we're having a conversation about a 6th win in a row. How challenging is it for any team in the NBA to be able to go on a roll of 6 games and then be a team who everybody said, oh my goodness, they're, deficient on the defensive side of the ball, but yet they're top 5 in defense. And one of the things that kind of made me a little bit nervous about them not playing there's another complete game, inside out. So when their threes weren't hitting, they went inside, and they had an advantage. And when the threes were hitting for the Lakers, the Hawks switched it up in that second half and started trying to really nail them down and really at least make them fight to get the 3. And then had a little challenge in the inside, but again, it was complete effort. And you always say effort, and I always go, I don't play that. But effort it's not an A for effort, it's an A for effort to get you to overtime, to get you a win.
I think, Tenitra, when you mentioned a couple things, and one of the concerning parts for me in this game is when you have somebody like Onyeka Okongwu who has been playing so much better. I'm like, what kind of world are we living in? Are we seeing Onyeka Okongwu and DeAndre Hunter both contributing on the offensive side of the ball at the same time, consecutive games, for crying out loud, and then he goes out with a foul? I had a little bit of concern about, Trae Young being a guy who had like 2 ill-advised. Well, one of them was definitely an ill-advised shot at the end of regulation. And then the other one, obviously, he was going to be the go-to guy to go for the game winner, and they ended up getting that one blocked, where I feel like they should have just drawn up something better than that. Onyeka Okongwu ends up fouling out. A couple guys hit some big threes in overtime, being, LeBron James and Gabe Vincent. And so I think that the Hawks have shown that they can weather the storm. They've showed that they can punch back and fight back, obviously, in big games. And it's refreshing. It is. It feels good to be able to say that I'm seeing. Look, listen, we're talking about defense. You mentioned something about the Hawks being better on defense.
Exactly.
I can't tell you the last time that we had a conversation where we had like real conversations about the Hawks being really, really good on defense. Probably haven't had that conversation since they won like 60 games in a season. So I think
we'll have that conversation in the second segment for sure. Yeah, but I think part of the reason that they were where they were is because of Quinn Snyder. Quinn Snyder has really been calling great schemes. His strategies have worked to perfection. I mean, that's when you get 6 straight wins. But I'll call out even one thing that he did that I loved, which was in the beginning, you saw Dyson Daniels in the game, but in the beginning, you didn't necessarily see Dyson Daniels getting on the bigs for the Lakers. And unfortunately, Onyeka Okongwu, Clint Capella couldn't do anything with Anthony Davis. And we know that Anthony Davis and LeBron James ended up balling out, but it wasn't so much that they were trying to stop them, just a little containment. Make it a little bit difficult on them, because in the long run, they might get a little tired and you might be able to take advantage of it. So I felt like little things like that Quinn Snyder did. I really, really love the way that he's been coaching, and I love the way that he's using his rotation. And something else that you said, DeShaun, I love the confidence that he's instilling in these players to say, hey, I believe you can get in there and stop. Like you said, he put Onyeka Okongwu in at the end of regulation for that final possession. That's showing that you have confidence in your bench.
Trust him.
And when the Hawks couldn't hit, and I know you're going to love this statement, when the Hawks couldn't hit, it seemed like they couldn't land a 3 in the ocean. Along comes DeAndre Hunter off the pitch.
Yeah.
Let Quinn Snyder cook, because Quinn cooked tonight.
They haven't fallen in love with that 3, which is something I was afraid once they start playing well from the perimeter like we had been seeing, for a couple of the games during the duration of this stretch. I'm like, here we go again. They're going to start falling in love easily with the 3-ball again and not going inside where you can make much more easier money.
Yep.
But they haven't fallen in love with it. And there goes that balance that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks of how they're showing. And that's ultimately what's equating into those wins, the fact that they've learned how to balance both sides of the ball and keep doing the same thing that they've been doing, not getting away from what have been getting them the W's. And we can't say that about this team in some years past.
Right. But I would still give that credit to Quinn because he's the one who helped them not to get stuck past the perimeter. So I love the game that I love how he's using each and every one of his players in the 9-player rotation rather. So DeShaun kind of told you guys, the Hawks defense did it again. We'll talk a little bit of, but it's the Hawks defense that did it again to get them the 6th win. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. The terms do apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. So DeShaun, like you said, we don't often and have not often started a postcast talking about defense. We have not continued a postcast talking defense. And we will even end the postcast talking defense because that is how the Hawks were able to get it done. Check this out, DeShaun. At halftime, the Hawks, it was tied 64-64, right? And the teams were close in every stat except, of course, at the 3-point line. The Lakers had the edge, 47% to the Hawks, 37%, which normally would be good, right? But the Hawks had a slight edge in free throw percentage, which they were going inside. And for me, I said they need to get to the foul line more and also do a little less defending and not fouling because, that could obviously did harm one player, but it didn't harm the Hawks overall. So when you look down the stats line, if you will, everything is still very, very identical between these two teams, except when you start looking in places like the rebound. Look at that stat. Hawks won on offensive rebounds. Hawks won on defensive rebounds. So that's good because they were constantly trying to make the Lakers not be able to get their second chance points, right? And then on offensive rebounds, I really wanted to call that out as well because you basically turn that into your defense and that allowed you to get second chance points. So I thought that rebounding, despite the fact that Anthony Davis was giving them the blues inside, I think that was good. They had 10 steals. And while the Lakers had 11, can we say that the 10, probably the 10th was the one that really worked for the Hawks? But yeah, that's one of the sneaky good places where they start to separate themselves from other teams. I think that was huge. And then they started getting to the line and most of them started learning how to defend without fouling. But we'll talk about why they still had so many fouls in the third segment.
I think, Tenitra, that, you make such a good point. We're talking about their rebounding efforts, especially when you consider the fact the last 5 games they've had they've averaged about 51 rebounds, right? 10 steals per game, right? You also have guys that aren't afraid to attack the glass. Like we talk about how much they eat up on the inside on the offensive end, that hungry hippo style, continue to feed the paint, but also, do your best to not only defend the rim the best of your abilities, but make sure
Mhm.
that you're grabbing those rebounds.
Yeah.
Zachary Risachet, when he's not able to bring any very much production on the offensive side, which typically everything he gets is because of his elite ability to be able to move without the basketball. That's pretty much how he
Mhm.
gets just about all his points, unless it's on the perimeter. He
Right,
still
right.
does a good job at rebounding and getting the ball out in the open court. A couple other guys do the same thing as well. If Onyeka Okongwu, maybe not necessarily always the ball coming to him, but between
Mhm.
him and Clint, I think finding a way to kind of volleyball the ball into the front, into the backcourt where Trae Young is standing out there to kind of corral it and reset something to get another play going, resetting the clock and whatever else, what have you. Second chance points, opportunities.
Mhm. Yeah.
All of those little things stem from, you know, having a nose for the ball, having a knack for rebounding, knowing
Mhm.
based off of, you know, developing and establishing that chemistry amongst your teammates, who I think they're still, while they're still learning how to get used to one another,
Mhm.
they're starting to kind of figure out one another. It's not
Yeah.
easy to know where the ball is coming off the rim when you
Mhm.
have new shooters on this team.
Yeah.
And they're learning that, and they're out hustling their opponents, if I'm being honest. So
Exactly.
again, all of those things, getting to the ball before your opponent, all those things are just really predicated based off of the energy that you're bringing on the defensive end to provide easy offense on the other side.
Right. And obviously, the play that was the play of all plays in regulation was Anthony Davis getting tied up with not one, not two, but three Hawks.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that you needed to see, because I felt like there were times throughout the game where we saw what I'll call gang defense,
Sure.
and meaning that, hey, they stick with your man, but if you see that the play is going, into the paint, and you see whomever it is kind of coming full speed, and you bring a little help, I think that's good. And in the instances where the Lakers did not make those buckets, I saw the Hawks, and I'm talking multiple Hawks, DeShaun, waiting for that rebound.
For sure.
That to me is such a game changer. That is how you win close games, when you do the little things like they did, and then you force a jump ball. And then you get the jump ball,
for sure,
because DeAndre Hunter played that excellently, just enough to let LeBron James touch the ball and let it go out of bounds. So again, that's where I start to see good defensive IQ that maybe we have not seen in the past. And just one more thing on defense before we talk about the offense, because it was solid all the way around as well. It's so cool when we're able to see two things. When we're able to see all players get at least 3 rebounds. And when we're able to see that 5 players, that 4 on the starting lineup and 1 off the bench got a steal. So to me, that goes to, how we always talk about balanced basketball on the offensive side.
Of course.
I think that shows balance on the defensive side as well.
Side.
Speaking of the offense, man, oh man. I mean, honestly, DeShaun, you can start anywhere. You can absolutely start anywhere. But I think we'll start with DeAndre Hunter for you.
Oh, just for me, huh? Listen, I tell people all the time, I'm always in love with being the person to put his hand up and say, yep, that was me that was given all the criticism, because I think it's been great, not only just the tear that he was on in this particular game, but he also showed that he doesn't have to get angry to be this player all the time. After that little bit of a dust up or whatever that was with LeBron, he kept his head. He didn't get out of control. He still found a way to come back, hit a big time basket for them. Remember, they're doing this without essentially any Jalen Johnson in the third quarter pretty much at all, because he was out with 4 fouls, picked up 2 early ones in the quarter, so due to foul trouble. But when you're able to do all of those things, and you have somebody like a Dre who is taking the ball to the basket, just playing with it, just oozing with a different kind of confidence. He almost looks like a totally different player out there. And I love the way that he's allowing the game to just come to him. He's shooting the ball in rhythm. He's playing well on the defensive side. On the offensive side, he's just getting getting buckets and just looking like his shot selection. He's not taking shots that don't look like his type of shots. He's not going out there looking like he's just doing something new that he just practiced and shoot around earlier tonight. So when you're playing like that, and then you've got other guys, especially the bench contribution that they've been consistently bringing, the fourth best ranked amongst those in the NBA in terms of scoring on the offensive side. Got to give those guys a lot of credit too.
Yeah, you definitely do. And one thing about DeAndre Hunter that I wanted to bring out as well, there was a play, just like you said, when he was inserted into the lineup and they're bringing the ball back up the court and Trae dishes it and DeAndre Hunter just hits the three. There would have been times last year that Trae would not have given that ball to DeAndre Hunter. And he certainly wouldn't have been the first option. He might have been the third or fourth. But there were times that there was one particular time where I literally saw him just dish it and DeAndre Hunter just boom, catch and shoot. That tells me that whatever Quinn Snyder is doing for him, with him, is working. And he seems like he's got he has his joy back in playing the game.
That's right.
Even, like you said, he used to be the guy who was the two-way player that we always talked about. We would say, man, why can't everybody just play like Dre at both ends? Remember, we used to talk about that all the time. And now Dre, in a different role, is showing you what he can do just coming off the bench. And I just wanted to kind of shout that out, because when you come off the bench and hit 26 points, get 3 rebounds, couple of assists, 2 blocks, 34 minutes, that to me deserves something. And that to me deserves some kudos.
Well, before Tenitra, I feel like he was kind of like, sometimes it seems like he's kind of hard to read because he kind of brings his personality to the court. He's just kind of comfortable and just kind of cool. Doesn't look like he say a whole lot. Don't really show a lot of emotion. But he's been showing a lot more emotion in some of these games ever since he's gotten this new position off the bench. Tenitra, real quick before we get ready to go to the next break, are you ready to call him the third scoring option for this team or not yet?
When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about where there was a 6th man on the court, and we'll talk a little bit about what DeShaun said on who we actually think is that third cog in the wheel for the Hawks. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You may want to think about that when the Falcons go up to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, to answer the question of whether or not I think that Dre is the third option, if you will, or he's the third go-to guy when they need him, I think I'm comfortable with saying that now. Because, and when I say that, just meaning minus the starters, right? Because I think that Trae, obviously, your first go. Oh, but let me say this. And if anybody wants to chime in who's watching, you guys can chime in.
There's so many. Yeah.
You can totally chime in. This is the time for you to join the show. But I will say, we got to cut it. Robert Blackman hit it. RRP, none of them tonight. No random role.
It's been that way for the last couple games
exactly,
too.
Because they have literally said, "Hey, you over there, X. I don't know your name. You're not gonna beat us tonight. I tell you that much." You're right. That's why that's a big part of why you're seeing those 6 wins, because that guy hasn't existed for them. And so James Edwards gives his vote to Dre. But I'm going to go back and say I'm going to cheat a little, because I think that Trae and Jalen Johnson are 1A and 1B. I think that you could go to either one of them in crunch time and they can get it done. As easily as Trae hit that three, missed the three in regulation. In my mind, 12 seconds left. You guys have been killing it on the inside. If you can find a way to get the ball to Jalen Johnson, get it to Jalen Johnson, and we're done here. So I feel like they're more 1A and 1B. And some of that is because Trae is okay with not always being the number one go-to. So if you give me them as my your 1A and 1B, then I'll give you DeAndre Hunter as number 3A and 3B, because you know who I'm going to give. I'm going to always try to give the 3B to Bogey, just because the Hawks still don't have a super, super sharp shooter, but those two are the two sharp shooters as far as the threes go. And they really were the cogs in the wheel that brought this team back in the second half.
Well, I think that's something else that, when I was listening to Trae in the post game, and he was just kind of, speaking on, saying, that he felt like he had let the team down in regulation of this one tonight, and that his teammates actually want him to shoot a little bit more. I don't know if they should say that so loudly, because I feel like anytime you say that to Trae, ain't no telling what's going to happen. But he certainly mentioned how DeAndre Hunter has, been a difference maker for this team and how much they need him. And remember, this goes back, I don't know how many years, probably to the first or the second year where, the team just seemed like they looked and felt the vibe, the energy, and everything else seemed like it was different when they had him. And then he would go down, and not only for short periods of time, but for long periods of time. And then the team didn't look as good. But whenever they would have him in the lineup or have him just actively playing, then it seemed like they would look really good. And so, I think that it's just really good to see. Of course, the team started off without having him, and ironically and coincidentally enough, they weren't playing as well when he was, and then he comes back just like he did this year and past years, and they look better. So it's definitely a credit. And listen to Bogey, and I think we talked about this earlier. Same thing with Onyeka, who's been given more on the offensive side, maybe not on the offensive side as much for Clint, but even Clint has been the guy that has been racking up a ton of rebounds. I think he's averaging like 15 or something in the last handful of games or something like that. But I'm curious to know, remember, I want to remind the people of this. There were some guys that when DeAndre was down or when Bogey was down, right, that came in and was still, maybe the end result wasn't always the greatest, but we're still contributing really good minutes and production for this team. We haven't been seeing David Roddy get into the, get back into the game. We haven't been seeing Larry Nance, who's been working on that jump shot and bringing some of that athleticism. These were guys that when they did get wins, or when they was really trying to keep it close and whatever else will have you, was really helping this team out significantly. Just imagine what it's like in case you get into a situation where you have to bring guys like that back. I feel good and confident saying that they at least know what to do to kind of keep this thing going.
Yeah, and certainly that's a great call. I think that one of those calls as well was Quinn Snyder making the decision not to play those two along with Garrison Matthews and Kobe Buffkin. He decided that the 9-player rotation would include Vit Krejci, and I got to give him some credit. There were moments, just a moment here and a moment there, where he just kept the Hawks in it. So a lot of credit to him being a part of the bench conversation that we're having. And I also wanted to give some credit to more of our, I'm going to call them our pseudo OGs, Onyeka Okongwu, DeAndre Hunter, and Trae Young, and even Jalen Johnson. The reason I want to talk about them is because those four have been here for a couple of years, right? And let's just be real. And I know that our listeners and our viewers would probably agree that the officiating we saw tonight, shall we say, was uneven. But you have to be prepared that sometimes players and teams get calls and sometimes they don't. So I wondered, when it seemed like it was going against the Hawks, will the Hawks be mature enough to play through bad calls? Answer, and did. Because those four guys, I'm really proud of them, because those are four young guys. Those are four who, for the last couple of years, we've said you cannot get caught up when the foul call doesn't go your way. You got to move on. And I felt like tonight, they gave a little commentary and kept it moving. That's some maturity that we really are starting to see on a consistent basis that I really wanted to just point out, because that maturity in crunch times like this, where you go to overtime and you certainly didn't want to, and then Onyeka Okongwu fouls out, so you're like, oh God, what are we going to do now because of the contribution that he had given? But they did. They stayed the course and did.
I think the stay the course thing is so spot on because they're not letting bad calls affect them. Guess what? They could have wavered when Dyson Daniels ended up getting that steal in overtime, I think it was, and then going in for the layup, and LeBron blocked it, goes out of bounds, all to find out that it went off of Dyson Daniels' fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
There's situations like that happen. I think, again, I hate to be the person that keep bringing up past years, but I think it's more so because of the credit that this Hawks team gets because of the way that it has grown. They aren't letting those things affect them. There were some calls tonight, in my opinion, that I think
I can't wait for the report to come out tomorrow. I cannot wait for the report.
I think there was bad officiating on both sides tonight, and at least it was consistent for the officials. Now, granted, I'm not in love with that, but in the same time, I felt like they kept it consistent. The sad part about it is that they were bad all across the board all night long. But this is also a game that I give the Hawks a lot of credit to, because not only do they learn how to overcome bad officiating when it's not going their way, but also this is the Los Angeles Lakers coming in here, and they're coming off a game where they just got destroyed by 41 points to another team. So, and it's LeBron, and everything else that goes along with that. You got multiple Hall of Famers on this team. So from that standpoint, you just got to be really proud of the way. And to be honest with you, even if this game would have resulted in a loss for the Atlanta Hawks, I still would have been proud of the way that they fought, because they showed that grit. They showed that they played with pride, and they showed that a relentless effort, even when calls wasn't going their way. And Jalen Johnson, there's one of their best players, had gone out early.
And they go down by 11 points. And in the third quarter, the pesky third quarter, even the first part of this year. Oh, thank you so much, DJ. Appreciate you. Thank you. But yeah, when you think about the first part of this year, like we don't even have to go to last year. The first part of this year, there were things that we would see with the Hawks and say, oh boy, here we go again. So I don't think it's just about last year or last season. I think it's even about the shifting that we've seen already in this short season that you hope we can continue to see. And I think we will, because I think it's a culture that Quinn has established.
You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I wasn't very optimistic about this team coming into the year. I love saying this because I love being wrong. I wasn't very confident. I mean, I come into the year and I'm thinking to myself, even told you and other people that, work within our show, that it looks like it's going to be a long season. It looks like it's going to be rough. I mean, I just want to be transparent, put it out there on the table. And while I can say that I do believe that there was going to be a stint and a point in time where it was going to be like, all right, they're trying to put something together, I didn't think it would be this early in the season. So I think as early as we've been seeing this, I mean, this is not only earlier than I anticipated that it would be, but much earlier than I thought that it would be. Yeah. And now that we're kind of at that particular point this early, I think that it can only get better. And honestly, that's something that the league wants to keep their eyes and ears open for, in terms of knowing about staying aware of what the Atlanta Hawks are doing, because this is a 6-game win streak and it's within the first 25 games of the season.
Well, the Denver Nuggets better be aware they're bringing an 11-9 record into the arena come Sunday. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the #1 place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy Brad Rowland. See you next time.